Hi everyone. Through the years, we've all had that one question in the back of our minds that a lot of us don't ever want to find the answer to, which of course is, what if the Master Chief finally meets his demise? It's a tricky question to answer, and although none of us have the answer right now, we can speculate and theorise. So here is my story of what I think could happen. Also just wanted to quickly point out that we have Fletch here from Ultimate Halo. He's going to be recording Master Chief's lines, so take it away Fletch and plug your stuff.
Hey up lads and lasses, this is Fletch here from Ultimate Halo. I'm going to be recording the lines of Master Chief in this video, so if you want to see more Halo Infinite related videos then visit my channel Ultimate Halo, as well as FletchUH, which is my Twitter for lots of Halo art. And anyway, I hope you enjoy the video and I hope you enjoy this story.
With that out of the way, let's begin. A pelican flies across the blue skies of a Halo. The pelican looks to have seen some battle over its time in service. It has external plates welded along the bulkhead to keep the bird airtight. The rest of the repairs look to have been put together in a rush. The grey steel colour sticking out like a beak of a bird almost, sharp and angular. A pilot with a long, uncut beard in a blue navy uniform sits in the cockpit, piloting the bird. His mind wanders as he makes his way to the marked waypoint. If a fishing boat's wooden planks are replaced over the years until all of its original pieces are completely gone, does that make it the same vessel? After all, the original pieces are no longer there, yet a boat still remains. He had once been taught about the ship of Theseus as a child. The ship of Theseus was a thought experiment. It was a question with no correct answer, a paradox. Passed down through generation to generation by an ancient civilization on Earth. The pilot is distracted from his mind-bending thoughts and looks to the passenger bay monitors, seeing movement on his cockpit screens. To see the Master Chief readying himself and arming up with what little weapons and ammunition they had. The tired-looking pilot once again thinks to himself, if a human is ripped apart and put back together with different pieces, does that still make him human? He knew that replacing body parts was much more different and abstract than an object or vessel, but sometimes the pilot wondered how the Master Chief could be so cold sometimes. He was trained to be a weapon, that's true, but he never seemed to show any humanity to the pilot, apart from the odd occasion here and there. He was a literal killing machine, created by an even colder genius from ONI. The Master Chief speaks up through the comm system that him and the pilot share.
We're closing in on location. Once we reach it, evacuate the ring. Assist what other UNSC forces you can.
The pilot's face saddens at that sentence. He engages autopilot and unbuckles himself from the seat he was strapped into and makes his way into the passenger bay. No. Don't tell me this is some hero's suicide mission to save the universe. I don't want to hear it. I'm bringing you off of this place and then we're all going home. The Master Chief finds himself looking down at the pilot, a finger outstretched and pointing towards his visor.
If I do this, the war between humanity and the banished will be over.
The Master Chief grabs a BR-55 battle rifle from a rack on the wall of the ship and slings it onto his back. He looks back down to the pilot. The pilot puts his face in his hands in annoyance and breathes heavily. Listen, big guy, once everybody is off this ring, I'm coming back for you and we're escaping. There's no way you're being left on this godforsaken ring. Do you understand me? The tired pilot looks to a heavily armoured super soldier in determination, exhausted but willing.
There won't be time for an evac. This is the only way we can keep the banished and the flood away from Earth.
The Master Chief turns to the exit of the moving Pelican and walks to the edge of the passenger bay. A strange Forerunner device in the shape of a T hangs from around his armor's belt.
10 seconds till drop.
The pilot snaps back to his cockpit in frustration. He did it again. That cold machine way of looking at things. It was maddening. How could he always think like that? The pilot sits down in his seat and deactivates the autopilot. He comes up to a large silver platform that seems to hang from a snowy mountain. He spins the Pelican around so that the passenger bay is now facing the platform for the Chief to step out onto. He watches the screens once again as the Master Chief walks off the ramp and onto the platform. The Pelican lifts slightly as the change in weight knocks the bird upwards for a second and then corrects itself. "Chief," the pilot shouts out, now at the doorway of the cockpit facing the exit. "Good luck." The Master Chief in return nods his head back at the unkempt pilot and then begins walking towards a large pyramid-like structure. The Master Chief unslings his rifle and readies it into his hands for whatever banished forces surround the control room. As he cautiously moves up the first ramp, he thinks to himself of how familiar this is. It wasn't the first time reaching a Halo's control room. In fact, this was now his third. And this would be his third ring that he had destroyed in order to save the galaxy. His first encounter was on Installation 04, a ring in orbit of an orange gas giant infected with flood and being investigated by both UNSC and Covenant forces. He was almost tricked into firing that Halo to wipe out the flood by the monitor of the ring known as 343 Guilty Spark, but Cortana set him on the correct path before it could be done. John slows his pace and frowns in the remembrance of him and Cortana working together. It was almost a physical pain that he could feel. The AI and him had been on many operations before, and they had saved the galaxy together quite a few times. It was going to be strange doing this without her. After making his way near the top of the first ramp, he notices a few squads of the Banished, around 4 elites, 7 brutes, and 20 or so grunts. Taking them head on wasn't going to be an easy task, but his new Mjolnir Mark 6 Gen 3's shielding system was a bit quicker to recharge than the Gen 2's version. He should be able to handle the enemies in the correct order. The newer armor system also came with a detachable grapple that could be used to pull a Spartan to a location quickly or to quickly pull an object towards the user. Chief looks down at his left forearm plating at the grapple hook launcher. He then looks up at the pyramid-shaped structure to see the platform above the one he was currently standing on slightly overhangs. He could use this to his advantage. He aims his left arm upwards and launches the grapple upwards towards the overhang, slinging him into the air. The brick of heavy armour reaches its peak velocity into the air without being noticed and then begins to quickly descend back down and lands directly on top of a brute with a gravity hammer. His landing instantly kills the unsuspecting brute by planting his knife into the back of his neck. An elite turns at the sound of the heavy thud to see the large Spartan tossing a plasma grenade that he had borrowed from the now very dead brute. The elite, without time to make a sound, catches the grenade with his face and explodes into a hot blue ball of plasma. Now he had their attention. As the elite exploded, the Master Chief reveals himself, diving through the fiery blue blast of plasma with a gravity hammer in hand. The closest enemy towards him was a brute, readying his spiker. Before he can get it to level with the demon, the Master Chief flings the hammer into its chest, knocking the brute flying into his clan brother next to him, rendering the two incapacitated. The grunts around the Banished members begin to panic. Some recognise the now serious trouble they were forced to face. Some ran further upwards to the next ramp in a blind panic to escape the Spartan's warpath. The other remaining grunts began opening fire towards the Chief's position as they hopped around in and out of small Forerunner barriers. Before a bolt of plasma could hit the Master Chief, he dives to the closest cover he could. A small metal barrier that seemed to have stuck out of the floor. As the plasma bombarded the Spartan's cover, an elite pressed forward to his position with an energy sword in hand. As the elite makes it to the corner of the Master Chief's cover, an armoured leg blasts towards the Sangheili dog-like legs, breaking the alien's thick bones. The elite falls to the ground and roars in pain, dropping his sword. The Master Chief wastes no time, grappling the now injured elite and using his body as cover. As he holds the elite upright with one hand holding the back of his armour, another is grasping his battle rifle. He sweeps the platform from right to left, whilst the elite's energy shields flash electric blue from friendly fire. The Spartan sends round after round at as many grunts as he can, currently occupying the platform in front of him. He nails a few in the head. Some of the grunts begin to panic and also try to make their escape. More brutes and elites fire at the chief that's now coated in purple blood. The elite's body goes completely limp, and the elite becomes heavier than when he was alive. Chief lets go of the mangled corpse and reloads his battle rifle. With a thud of the lifeless body, the Master Chief fires in rapid succession, firing a burst into a fusion core that lie behind two brutes, causing a horrific explosion of huge metal fragments to embed themselves deep into the Jarlhanai's fur-covered backs. Chief then snaps over to an elite with a plasma rifle in hand. He reduces its energy shield swiftly, but just as the Sangheili is depleted, so did the Spartans. Chief once again dived behind cover for his armour shielding system to recharge. As he reloads his weapon, he hears a crash on the platform. Brute drop pods, as if from nowhere, plant themselves into the metal structure. Around 7 more brutes have now joined the fight, all heavily armoured, and most with gravity hammers. He knew it wasn't going to be possible breaking through their defences, especially not at close quarters. Out of nowhere, heavy machine gun fire begins to pepper the banished forces, completely destroying any brute, elite or grunt that stands in the chief's way. The noises were deafening, and pained screams could be heard from the now dying forces. Chief looks to his left to see a rugged-looking Pelican blast huge armour-piercing rounds from underneath the cockpit. "You're not doing this alone, Chief," a voice calls out over the comms. Although he wanted the pilot to escape this ring, he had to admit, he was glad to see him. A slight smile began to creep across his weathered face. "What are you waiting for, Spartan? Get up there." With that, the chief began a light jog up the ramps to the top of the structure. "Now tell me when you're done. I'm not leaving you here," Pilot shouts out through the comms. Into the wall of the cliffside at the top of the pyramid-shaped structure sits a door with a red light across it. The door was huge, and seemed to have stretched horizontally like a hangar door, almost enough to fit a Pelican inside. The chief, as if by muscle memory, walks over to the right side of the door towards the control panel and opens it up. The light changed from red to green, and it slowly begins to open vertically. He centres himself back into the middle of the opening hallway, rifle resting in his hands. 3 grunts are stunned as they see the silhouette of a huge armoured super soldier stood in the massive doorway. They immediately begin to panic, and instead of even aiming their weapons, run away past the chief and outside of the structure. Through the hallways Chief goes, clearing whatever little enemy forces occupied the space, cutting them down swiftly with his battle rifle. He eventually reaches the last door within the hallways. Just like the entrance, a control panel on the right side of the locked door sits there glowing. The Master Chief moves over and places his hand on the hard light control mechanism, opening the door to reveal a huge room. And at the centre, a glowing hologram of the halo with different symbols sticking out from the image as if highlighting section of the ring's surface. He begins moving along the bridge in the middle of a gigantic room towards the Halo's control centre. He once again had a slight feeling of something familiar. He knew why it was there, but couldn't quite describe the feeling. Was it nostalgia? No, it was more like a memory, but different. Deja vu? No, that's not it either. As he reaches the control panel, a snarling voice from behind him shouts to him. So this is the legendary demon. The voice shouted out with venom and hate in its statement. Before whatever it is can finish its sentence, the Master Chief turns around, swinging his rifle around, aiming straight at whatever made the comment. A huge brute chieftain with a peculiar looking gravity hammer in hand and a scar on the left side of his mouth smiles with horrid contempt. In his other hand lies a struggling pilot in a blue navy suit by the back of his uniform. "Put me down, you damn dirty ape!" The pilot spits at the brute. Atriox laughs and looks back to the Master Chief. "Away from the controls, Spartan. Your feeble attempt to destroy the Banished will not be happening today," he shouts in pleasure as he tortures the pilot, chuckling at the end of his sentence. Master Chief replies,
If we don't do this now, the flood could spread across the galaxy. None of us will survive.
Atriox snarls in disgust. "And if you don't drop your weapon, your little friend won't survive either." The pilot, through a busted lip, shouts over to the Chief. "Do it, Chief. Send this ape to hell." With that comment, Atriox launches the pilot, turning around and throwing him into the wall, knocking him unconscious, or maybe worse. Chief doesn't drop his weapon and aims straight for the now raging brute. His mace-like gravity hammer flickers to life, and 3 red blades of hard light energy line the 3 pointed sides of the weapon. "What are you waiting for, demon?" Atriox shouts. The Master Chief has heard enough. He begins a barrage of bursts from his rifle, peppering the now charging brute. As Atriox got closer, Chief, without looking, points his left arm up at the ceiling and drops his rifle to the ground, pulling out a frag grenade with his right hand and dropping it at his feet. At just the last second before Atriox can make physical contact with him, his grapple hook pulls him into the air, avoiding the powerful blow of Atriox's hammer. As he is flung upwards into the air, an explosion below him, right where he once stood, blasted out, slinging sharp fragments into the raging brute, shocking him and damaging his armour. As Atriox stumbles onto one knee, the Master Chief, now with a knife in hand, flies back directly down towards Atriox. As he gets closer to landing, a beam rifle blasts out and completely penetrates the Master Chief's abdomen. Chief's armour shielding systems are completely drained, and a brand new superheated hole is now gaping through his stomach. He lands down next to Atriox, hard, clashing against the metal floor. He lays facing upwards to the ceiling high above him, his armour's warning systems flashing on his hood. His armour quickly reacts to the now torn up Spartan by releasing biofoam to seal the wound, preventing him from bleeding out. Atriox, with a burnt and cut face, stands and looks down to the critically injured demon. On Atriox's left, another brute appears beside him, with a smoking hot beam rifle in hand. "Just as easy as wiping out the rest of your people," the new brute chuckles. Chief struggles for air as the brutes speak. The brute duo look down onto the now dying demon as he takes shallow breaths. Atriox speaks with the brute next to him. His eye had been damaged and his armour seemed almost ceremonial. He had once seen this brute before. His hologram had once warned him, taunting the Chief with the banished presence on the ring. This was Escharum. "Remove this filth from here, and then gather the rest of my forces through the portal to join us on this ring before the rest of the humans around the Ark find our gateway to this installation." Chief takes in another sharp breath, doing his best to keep awake. Of course, Atriox. And what of the... A shotgun blast is heard behind the brutes, and Escharum stumbles forwards. With what little energy remains, Chief lifted his left arm and launches his grappling hook at the surprised brute. The grapple wraps around his neck, and the Master Chief pulls with all his strength, bringing the brute tumbling down onto him. With his knife still in hand, he plunges the blade as hard as he can deep into the fallen brute's neck. Grapple squeezes the alien blood out of the dying brute's open neck wound, killing him. Atriox spins around to see the pilot about to pump a second shell right into Atriox's face. Before he can pull the trigger, he grabs the tiny human by the arm, raising him off the ground and dropping the weapon. "You're going to die for that." As Atriox readies his hammer, Chief kicks Atriox's legs, bringing him down. The pilot falls out of Atriox's grasp. With all the life left in him, the Master Chief rolls on top of Atriox and pushes his blade down as hard as he can, pointing towards the brute's chest. With the critical injuries the Spartan had taken, he was losing his strength to fight. His augmented body was trying to give up on him, but he still pushed with everything he had. But it wasn't enough. Atriox headbutted the Master Chief, and his helmet's visor not only shattered, but the front end of the top actually dinted. The Chief rolled off, and his helmet fell off his head, landing a few feet away. Atriox stands, with the Chief's knife now in his hand. "Such a primitive weapon," he says, inspecting it as he twists the blade in his hand. "But an effective one," another voice replies to Atriox's comment. A blast of high-energy heat from a red laser blasts into Atriox's leg, bringing him down to one knee. Another Spartan from out of nowhere grabs Atriox's hand that still grasps the knife and slams it down into his own knee. He winces in pain, and another Spartan appears, this time on Atriox's right. A heavily armoured boot slams into his scorched face. Atriox attempts to rise back to his feet, before one of the two Spartans then finish the now crippled titan of a brute. One of the Spartans aims a pistol at Atriox's head. The brute, in retaliation, grabs at the Spartan's hand and struggles to point it away from his face. Without any struggle, the Spartan stood next to the one he had the hand of, passed another pistol to the Spartan's empty hand. Before Atriox could react and bring his other arm up, a thunderclap of a magnum ripped through the air, and a mangled new hole sits on the once deadly foe. Atriox's body slumps to the ground. "For a second there, Alice, I thought you was going to take all the glory," a low voice states. He passes the magnum back to the female Spartan. "After what he did to you, it was only fair you got the final blow," she replies calmly. Another Spartan walks over to them with Spartan laser in hand. "Isabel, have you made a connection back to the captain?" An orange hologram of a short-haired female AI in a white tank top materialises onto Spartan Jerome's armoured outstretched hand. "No, it doesn't look like I can reach back to the Spirit of Fire without going back through the portal." The Master Chief, in a critical condition, tilts his head over, watching a Spartan with a red stripe down the top of his helmet speak with an orange-coloured AI. For a split second, he saw himself in his position with Cortana in his hand. Like a flash of his memories trying to play. Another Spartan leans over him. "John, stay with me now." Spartan Douglas tries his best to keep Chief awake. "Isabel, what's his condition?" Alice asks, looking over Douglas's shoulder. "He's got multiple ruptured organs, but nothing our medical team can't fix. He is running out of time though." Douglas helps Chief to his feet.
Is the pilot okay?
Chief asks with concern in his voice. Red Team all look at him confused. He points to the unconscious man on the ground. It's as if they hadn't noticed him, only concerning with finishing Atriox and helping a fellow super soldier. Isabel projects her voice over Jerome's armor speaker system. "Multiple broken bones and fractures. Unconscious. High chance of slipping into a coma. Alice, wake him up. Don't let him take another nap," Jerome orders. Douglas injects John with an adrenaline shot, A dose this size would normally kill a human, but for a super augmented Spartan, it should help ignore the pain and keep him awake. With the adrenaline rushing through the Master Chief's body, he stands back on both legs without much assistance and slows his breathing down. "John, what are your plans here?" Jerome asks in confusion. Chief moves over to his helmet and picks it up, staring at its visor.
I'm going to transport this Halo through slipspace to the Ark's exact location, overriding its safety protocols.
John pauses, takes a slow breath and continues.
The ring will collide into the Ark, completely destroying them both, destroying most banished forces and annihilating the Flood population.
Isabel, with concern, replies to John, once again through Jerome's armor system. But to do that, you would have to stay on the ring. You can't activate slipspace travel remotely. Chief looks over to her outstretched orange hologram and nods his head in acknowledgement. Douglas and Jerome both look at each other, and then back at John. The pilot snaps back to life. In a confused panic, he grabs Alice's arms that are placed on his shoulders. What? Chief? Who are you? Where's Chief? Alice stands back up and steps away from him, giving the exhausted pilot room to breathe. He stands up immediately in a panic, not paying much attention to the other Spartans around him. He notices the helmet in his hands first, then the bloodied face. "Chief, oh my god, are you alright?" Without replying, he looks back at Red Team.
Get back to the Ark, take the pilot, and you escape whilst you can.
Red Team, in acknowledgement, nod their heads. The pilot looks around in confusion. "Wait, no, we can't still be going through with this, right?" The Master Chief straightens up and looks at the pilot for the first time without his helmet, his human eyes staring right back at his.
You can go back to your family now.
Tears begin to well in the pilot's eyes. "No, I told you no, there is no way we are leaving you here. Nowhere, no." He breaks out in a sob. "We can find another way. We can save the universe another day." The pilot falls to his knees. The Master Chief takes a knee beside the pilot.
Your fight is finished. Go be with your family.
He says with reassurance, resting a hand on his shoulder. The pilot looks up at Chief, staring into his blue eyes.
Go! Go!
The pilot stares back at him in disbelief, almost certain he could see tears welling up in his eyes as well. The Master Chief stands back up and nods at Red Team. Alice grabs the pilot by an arm and starts gently guiding him towards the exit. No, I can't do it. I won't. No, I can't do it. The pilot cried out as he reaches the exit, and the war-torn, destroyed Spartan 2 watches them go. He turns to the control panel and looks at the controls. The cavernous room turns silent as Red Team leave. He looks down at his battered helmet and picks it up. He looks inside and fiddles with it. A timer projects itself on the broken visor with a 10-minute countdown. He places it on the control panel and stares at it. A number slowly counts down, eventually to 0. As it does, he presses down on the hard light controls that launch the Halo into slipspace. It lights up, and the Halo transports itself to another dimension. As it does, he exits the control room and looks towards the sky of warping bluish purple. He sits down, resting himself against the barrier, and stares into the sky. His eyes fall heavy, and eventually he closes his eyes. Hi again, everyone. Thank you all for watching this heartbreaking video. It took a fair amount of time to write this story. I was actually worried about offending anybody's views of what they think could happen or would happen. So I just want all of you to remember, this is a hypothetical story that I wrote. It's not actually going to happen, and it's just one of many endings that I believe could happen to the Master Chief story. Anyway, I want to give a massive thank you to Fletch from Ultimate Halo. He's done an amazing job voicing out the Master Chief, and has been nothing but an absolute gentleman to work with. So make sure to go over to his channel and send him some love his way. I can't tell you how much I appreciate having you on here, Fletch, so again, thank you. So if you want to talk with me or let me know what you think about the story, then leave a comment below or join my Discord, links in the description. That's all for today. Stay curious everyone, and I love you all. Peace.